Hi everyone. I hope you can see me and you can hear me. We're going to start. So before we start, just some, as always, some organizational points. So our working language today is English, and we have a special Q&A section below your screen on Zoom. So you can ask any questions to our speaker and we will answer them during the Q&A. Also, you can see a separate window with the chat. So you can actually exchange there with other participants. So please introduce yourself. It's very interesting to know where are you from? Are you a corporate partner, corporate innovator, startup, or innovation ecosystem player? I propose we can start. I'm Ani. I'm leading the international project GenerationS Startup Corporate Accelerator, and thank you for joining us today. I'm very happy to introduce you today to our speaker, Dave Blakely, which is Senior Vice President of Education and Masterclasses at Mach49, and also Maxim Yermilov, co-founder and partner at Mach49 Vostok, Russian branch of Mach49. So hi Dave, hi Maxim.
It's a pleasure to be here, Ani.
It's a pleasure to host you today.
Pleasure is mine.
Great. So before we start, as usually, just a brief introduction of ourselves and our activities. And today I'm going also to make a brief overview of the innovative talks we've done. So GenerationS Startup actually it's corporate innovation development platform, which is trusted by 15,000 startups. We have more than 60 corporate partners, and we're working actually with 250 and more innovation ecosystem players. Basically, we are creating very tailor-made acceleration programs and different products to develop corporate innovations. This summer, we started as very special sessions, online sessions for our community. These sessions were aimed to support the community, the corporate innovators, our startups, and our partners during these tough times. The aim was to reveal key insights on working with innovations in frame of corporation. So just to remind you what we've done, the first webinar was with Inal Group, and it was devoted to innovation strategy and key metrics while working with open innovations. The second session we've organized was with BP Launchpad, and we've discussed the corporate accelerator model as a tool to work with startups. The third webinar was with Air Business Academy, an Airbus company, and we've talked about key skills to develop in order to work with innovations within the company. So it was the session aimed to highlight the key tools on open innovations and corporate innovations while working with external startups. GenerationS Startup has created a special short-term online course. You can see the QR code here. So if you would like to dig deeper on working with innovations, please reach out to us. And today it's a very special day because we're going to focus on the other subject of developing corporate innovations. And particularly, we are going to talk about how corporations can build and launch themselves successful startups. And for this, actually, we invited top experts from Mach49, which is the first growth incubator for global businesses. And I'll ask Maxim also to make a brief introduction before we pass the word to Dave, who developed an amazing content for you for this session. So Maxim, would you like to make a brief introduction of Mach49?
Yes, thank you very much. Dave, of course, will speak about Mach49 globally. It's a global corporate incubator who is on a mission to help large corporations compete with the startups by incubating local new businesses, new ventures, but also building incubators, but also doing corporate venturing. Mach49 Vostok is a Russian branch of Mach49. Was founded about 2 years ago, was very active before COVID, and has actually been even more active during COVID because of the ability to do virtual work during this period. We work very closely with our colleagues from Silicon Valley, in particular with Dave, who is a great expert in applying design thinking to energy, in particular oil business, but also in the area of fintech. We very much look forward to questions, having great workshop, which I hope is going to be very interactive, and also taking on your questions once they arise afterwards. Dave?
Great, thank you. Dave?
Well, thank you, Annie, for the gracious introduction, and thank you, Maxim. Maxim, I cannot wait to do more work with you and your Russian colleagues. It's been a pleasure to work with you. So let me say a few words about who I am and what I do. And let me start by confirming with Annie that you can see the screen.
Yes, we can.
Good. Okay. The goal of the next 45 minutes is for me to talk to you about the how, not why it's important, not what it is, but the how, the actual methods and tools that corporations all around the world use to build, create, and launch successful new ventures from within. What my organization, Mach49, which Maxim and I and other partners have created, what we do really falls into two categories. The first is disrupting inside out, creating, building, and launching new ventures from within Global 1000 companies and helping those companies to create incubators. And second, disrupting outside in, helping organizations to create corporate venture capital groups to make investments and to drive meaningful growth. Now, no discussion would be complete without the pandemic that Maxim referred to immediately. The global pandemic, of course, is a health crisis, which is leading to an economic crisis. And as we ponder the implications of COVID-19 on our lives and on our businesses, around everything from new venture creation to just day-to-day operations, it's hard to be optimistic. Myself, I'm particularly concerned about developing countries, nations in Africa, for example, and about food riots in those areas. During tough times, it's always important to ask, what happens to innovation and new venture development? So I'm looking forward to your questions, but first I want to ask a question of you. So Annie, if we could float the first question on the screen, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, please pick up the right answer.
Good. So take a minute to vote. During recessions of 2001 and 2008, did innovation slow down, remain about the same, and increase? That's a good indication, at least in the US, and I believe in Russia as well, of what the pace of innovation is like during the current pandemic. Good. Annie, let's see the results.
Yeah, just give our participants 5 more seconds, and we will
Certainly.
finish the voting.
Certainly.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can finish.
Good. What have we got?
Do you see the results or not?
They are not on my screen.
And now?
There they are. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know why I'm talking to you because you already know the answer to this question. In fact, you're absolutely correct that during 2001 and 2008, breakthrough innovation increased. You know, it's always good to look back at times when you made the wrong call. And we can close the poll at this point. 70% of you are absolutely correct. Look, it's always good to look back and ask, where did I make the wrong call? Where did I make the wrong judgment? In 2001, I was in Palo Alto, California, working away at a design and innovation firm called ideate. We were in Palo Alto, in Silicon Valley, at the epicenter of the 2001 dot-com bust, all right? And I told people I thought that breakthrough innovation wasn't happening, but that incremental innovation was continuing. Boy, was I wrong. Wrong, 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 okay? In fact, what was happening that I was not aware of? Toyota announced the Prius, Blu-ray discs were created, the iPod came out, Wikipedia came online, Napster had its demise, and other file sharing software advanced. By 2008, which we call the Great Recession in the United States, I knew better. So did Thomas Friedman, who's a journalist who's done a very rigorous study of these matters. And sure enough, in our last serious recession in the US, 2008, the Kindle came out, Watson was announced, hydraulic fracturing came online, Airbnb announced its site, Facebook went global, Twitter went global, Android was released. I could go on and on and on, but the point I want to make is right now around us are all kinds of exciting ventures and new ventures being created. We don't know about them yet, but you can be sure that rather than pulling back, conserving, and waiting it out, visionary leadership is seizing this opportunity to, if anything, accelerate, disrupt competitors, and create new markets. All right. Now, we are at an unprecedented time of disruption. Just a couple of facts that I wanted to share. If we look at the major stock indices in the United States, what we find is that, as one example of the instability of large companies today, 50 years ago, the average lifetime of a company on the US stock market was 75 years. Now it's 15 years and dropping. I could give you many other examples of increasing instability of large Global 1000 companies. But I want to draw your attention to another countervailing trend, and I have, which is the rise of Silicon Valley. I joined my first tech startup in 1985, before some of you in the audience were even born, okay? And without knowing it, I was actually part of the current sort of meme or paradigm of Silicon Valley. In 1985, Silicon Valley was a much admired exporter of technology all over the world, right? And that happened decade after decade after decade, okay? We were developing medical instruments and devices and silicon chips and hard drives and so on. Paradigm shifts, you know, you're not really aware of them until they shift. Today, Silicon Valley has its sights set on much bigger industries. Today, Silicon Valley has its sights set on industries like hospitality and financial services and transportation, all right? And it is remarkable to see the pace of disruption predicted decades ago by Clayton Christensen expanding as, for example, Airbnb flips Hyatt and Hilton on their heads, and Uber, for example, makes such shocking penetration into Hertz and Avis that Hertz rental car went bankrupt. So what we're seeing is an unprecedented level of creation of unicorns. And as a quick reminder, a unicorn is a privately held company whose private valuation accelerates rapidly to $1 billion or more. So now I have a question. I have a second question for you. Even as Global 1000, survey question 2, please. Even as Global 1000s are showing themselves to be less secure, less stable, shorter lived. What's the total value of unicorns created since 2011? Take a guess.
Perfect question. Will be waiting.
Great.
Okay.
And Anita, let's have a look at what people are guessing here.
Yeah, five more seconds. I see that it's still going on, so
Okay.
Our
All right.
participants are picking the right answers. So yeah, I'm sharing the results.
Good. And the answer, I think you'll all be interested to hear, 32% of you got correctly, is that 469 unicorns have been created with a total market value of $1.4 trillion. And we can close the poll at this point, Annie. So let me ask all of you a question, particularly those of you that are part of large global 1,000 companies, oil and gas, financial services, manufacturing, and so on. It's an exciting mix of industries represented on this Zoom call. A question that nobody has the answer to, but that I urge all of you to be asking yourself is this: where is the real bubble? Where is the real speculative bubble that is going to burst? Is it in the unicorns, which race so quickly to $1 billion, or in the case of companies like Snap, $20 billion valuation? Or is the real asset bubble with the global 1,000 companies who have shown themselves so easily prone to disruption by these unicorn startups? And indeed, in a world in which, at least in the US, the price to earnings ratios are, say, 26 or 28. That is, it takes $28 of investment to earn to get $1 of earnings on the stock market these days. Really, honestly, where is the speculative bubble? What does this mean to you if you work for a global 1,000 company? It means this. It means you have things that a startup could only hope to have. As a big oil and gas company, as a big fintech company, you have talent, ideas, distribution channel, expertise, brand, capital, okay? These are things that no startups have, okay? We've seen them flounder. And so we submit at Mach 49, and I'm going to validate this for you, we submit that there is no reason that global 1,000 companies could not have created many of the small unicorns. There is no reason that Netflix could not have created, there is no reason that Blockbuster Video, which went out of business, could not have created Netflix, okay? They had the relationships with the content providers, they had the brand, they had the distribution to a US-wide population. There is no reason that Marriott could not have come up with the idea of Airbnb. Big corporations need a couple of things. First of all, they need the knowledge, they need the how. They need to understand how it is inside the organizations that new ventures can be created. And second, the mothership, the leadership of big companies have hard work to do. They need to make sure to lift governance as appropriate on small new ventures that are created, to reject the orthodoxies of a large organization, to create a separate standalone entity that is not bound to the inertia of the large organization, and to protect new organizations against the corporate immune system with the antibodies that inevitably come up, okay? But this is what I want to say. No one should consider that new venture creation is easy. I've been doing this for 30 years. It's not easy. Just remember Dave Blakely's rule of just. If somebody uses the word just in a sentence about new venture creation as in, well, we just need to, they've never done it, okay? This is hard. But this is the point I want to make. New venture creation is a learnable skill. It is a learnable skill. It is not some sort of innate talent, and it is not magic. There is a population of crazy consultants that want to convince you that true new venture creation is magic. That's about protecting their market share, not about telling people the truth, okay? The fact is, I have never worked with any organization, in any part of the world, in any vertical market, where we couldn't come up with new and fresh thinking and exciting new directions for new venture creation. In overview, if you ask me the most important thing to remember about new venture creation, it's this. Let's take a page from some of the biggest or some of the most successful unicorns in the world, okay? What do they all have in common? From Uber to Tesla to Airbnb to Snap, okay? They don't start with business models and lots of Excel spreadsheets. They don't start with in-depth explorations of technology. They all start with customer pain points, okay? The signature example, which is true, I've met the people, is Uber started with the following customer pain. The founders of Uber couldn't get a goddamn taxi cab in San Francisco. That's why they started the business, okay? Customer pain. Successful ventures, whether they're unicorn startups or ventures created inside large organizations, couple customer pain with the art of the possible. So to use the Uber example, Uber couldn't get a cab, and then they said to themselves, how can we address this at the intersection of GPS, mobility, data analytics, and cloud computing? All right? Once we have an understanding of how we might bring emerging, and in many cases exponentially advancing technology to bear on customer pain, now it's time to create a series of experiments and small bets. We completely reject an approach in which large corporations commit large and monolithic blocks of funding for huge, huge programs, okay? It is incumbent on all of us who are interested in new venture creation to break our programs up into a series of short sprints, aggressively toll-gated sprints, in which the award for additional budget is predicated on a successful outcome. And only at this point, only when we've done experiments and small bets, only then have we earned the right to consider issues of business viability. So I'm not for a minute diminishing the importance of business model, revenue model, cost of customer acquisition, all of the issues that business people like us deal with from day to day. What I'm saying is many organizations take it on too early. The overall goal is to take a page from the playbook of venture capitalists and to launch a portfolio of new ventures. It's just like your personal investments. You want to diversify. You want to diversify across a number of dimensions using different technologies, different value propositions, different end applications, okay? Now the major phases of activity that we go through at Mach 49 are ideate, in which we're coming up with the notion of a new business venture, incubate, in which we are developing a plan and preparing to launch that venture, accelerate, where we're building the venture, and scale. I don't propose to cover the last one because most large organizations are extremely good at the scale piece of this. So let's at this point dig into the specifics of launching new ventures. You're a Global 1000 company. You're interested in launching a new venture. Where do you start? How do you decide where to go? The first thing I want to say is selecting the right venture or the right domain to start with should take careful thought. And you should take it upon yourself to go through what we like to call the ideate phase, okay? Create challenge statements. I'll show you an example. Come up with early hypotheses about who your customers are and what pains they experience. Come up with some hypotheses about new domains for where you might incubate a venture. And finally, select a team. Select a team of startup-like people who are energized and excited about a new direction and who are not frightened of risk, okay? So if I were to name 3 really important elements in the ideate phase for you to consider, the first is portfolio review, okay? Ask yourself, what is my organization really good at? Okay. And ask yourself, who are our customers? And exactly how are we going to evaluate potential solutions? We suggest that as you evaluate potential ideas to go into your incubation funnel, that you consider them across 4 attributes. Customer, which is, does anybody want this new product or service or new business? Product, which is, can we build it? And if so, how? Who are our partners? Business, which is, can we make money doing this? And can we build value for our customers and our shareholders? And finally, suitability. Are we the right organization to be doing it? 2 important steps leading up to that are challenge framing, in which you come with a question. And the best I can tell you is a good incubation is an answer to a challenge framing question. A good challenge framing question typically includes the stakeholder who you want to address, the problem you're trying to solve, and the benefits. The last point I want to make is I would, if I were in your shoes and you're wanting to ideate and identify domains to pursue, I would consider a new venture competition, a business plan competition. So a bit more on business plan competition. Maybe some of you have run these. I'll be interested during the Q&A about whether you've had success on them. But what I want to say is, more than anything, business plan competitions need to be run formally and inclusively. Make sure that the business plan competition has the profile it deserves. Create a program website, create a structured means of submitting the ideas, and more than anything, provide specific domains of investigation. So for example, on a current Qualcomm new venture competition, they've constrained the entries within Qualcomm, the huge chip company based in San Diego, California. They've constrained the entries to the new venture competition to robotics for this particular round of competition. And that's because otherwise you get so much breadth that it's hard to evaluate. And finally, make sure if you run a new venture competition that you give constructive feedback. So where are we? When we're done with the ideate phase, what we have is we have a team in place. We have a challenge question which describes for us, which is a question that the team is posing to answer, a question again based on a hypothesis about a stakeholder, a current problem or pain point, and the benefits or outcomes. And we've got a team selected, a team of 3 to 5 people to run our incubation. Now it's time to go into the next process, which is incubate. Let me just characterize incubate through its outcomes. Incubate is about creating a plan for a fundamental business with milestone-based outputs. When incubate is done, you've got a startup team, you've got a business ready to launch, and you've got the preliminary customer relationship manager work done, where you have beta customers who have put their hands up to test the new venture. So look at these outcomes on the screen in front of you. And again, let me ask all of you a question. How long should this take? And Ani, we're ready for question 3.
Yeah. The question is leave, so we're waiting for the answers. Yeah, could you just probably say it again? What is the question?
Sure. How long does it take to create a detailed plan for a new venture ready to launch, coupled with low fidelity prototypes, and also a team ready to roll, and customers who have in a preliminary way put their hands up to volunteer to be beta customers? What sort of time frame should we give that?
Okay, I think that everyone is voted, so I'm finishing and sharing the results. Yeah, you can see them.
Good. So You folks are proposing a very brisk program. The majority of you proposed 5 to 8 weeks. What we find to really get this right, and we can close the poll at this point, to really get this right, we recommend a 12-week process. And in overview, we recommend a process which involves initially, as I mentioned, finding the customer pain, deciding exactly what our product vision and minimum viable product are, and finally, confirming that we have a viable business and that we can make money. Where should you strive at the end of 12 weeks? At the end of 12 weeks, you should take a page from the venture capital playbook and you should have what we call a pitch day, okay? We recommend putting together a group of people, which is like the board of directors from a startup, which we call the new venture board. These are leads within your organization, members of senior leadership. 5 is often a good number, who function as sort of a board of directors. And at the end of 12 weeks, we pitch them, taking a page straight out of pitch days that you may have seen with startup events. Everything that you see listed on the screen in front of you is an essential piece of pitch day, from customer-facing discoveries, such as what pains did we hear from the stakeholders and what opportunities did we observe, to product or service visualizations, such as exactly what's our vision, what's the MVP, to a rigorous investigation of business viability on everything from what budget are we requesting to exactly what are the risk areas and what does the competition look like. We consistently do this in 12 weeks with Global 1000 companies. We get to this point. And there is nothing magic about our process. I submit that nobody should take longer than 12 weeks to create a plan. Let me at this point say a few words about each of the major elements within incubation. Let me say a few words about finding customer pain, which continues all through the program, about how I recommend you conceptualize your new product or service, and finally, how I recommend you evaluate the business. As I mentioned a little earlier, something that Global 1000 companies chronically overlook is the answer to the question, who's our customer? Does anybody want this? Does anybody care? Maybe you, people on the Zoom, have experienced this as well. I have worked with so many Global 1000 companies, all right, who have a very sophisticated description of the technology and the risk areas and the mitigation of the risk and the partnerships, and these extraordinary Excel spreadsheets that show $500 million in revenue in 5 years, but no one has ever paused to ask the question, anybody care? Anybody want this? So what I say to you is that customer insights, not market research, which is just a proxy for actual contact with customers, but customer insights that come from doing many, many interviews with potential customers, those are the basic insight of credibility. And without those customer insights, everything else is just uninformed opinion. Every spreadsheet, every projection, all right? How do we gain customer insights? This is what I recommend you do. All of you currently have hypotheses about pains that certain customers face, okay? An example of a hypothesis, for those of you, many of you who've worked in energy are familiar with non-destructive testing, advanced testing methods used to make sure that there are no inclusions or cracks in an oil pipeline, for example. So a hypothesis I might have about a pain point is I believe that oil and gas companies have trouble locating qualified non-destructive testing technicians while performing tests required by regulation. Okay? It's a pretty straightforward hypothesis, but it was on this hypothesis that Stanley Black & Decker built a successful line of business. I recommend you start with this sort of hypothesis, that you ask open-ended questions to customers. And when I'm talking about customers, I'm talking about a lot of customers. When we were working with Standard Bank, which is the largest lender by assets in sub-Saharan Africa, we were trying to understand how to make African countries more approachable for Global 1000 companies, to entice them to expand into sub-Saharan Africa, okay? We talked to every segment you can imagine. We talked to every role and persona you can imagine. When we were exploring the future of charging of fleets of electric vehicles for a new venture for Schneider Electric, which is called EIQ Mobility, which is now a successful and revenue-producing entity, okay? Look at this. We did a total of 300 interviews over the course of the program. It's those types of numbers that you need to get to, talking and developing a visceral, gut-level appreciation for a huge number of customers that are really what gets you to this magic point. What did we discover, for example, that made Global 1000s hesitant to enter sub-Saharan Africa? The big output of open-ended research with customers is pain points. Sure, find out what they like, you know, what they're interested in and things like that. But more than anything else, look for pain, look for problems, okay? And it is the second and seventh problem in Africa of all these problems that we discovered that led us to help Standard Bank create their new line of business, which is called Kula, which is a suite of products and services to give Global 1000 companies a soft landing and a welcoming landing as they build new entities in Africa. Of the 8 significant problems that we found in interviews, really the 2 biggest that floated to the top were the second. There's all kinds of credential fraud, and it is extremely difficult to find trusted employees and trusted partners on the ground. And second, we learned, to our surprise, that Africa is one of the few remaining places in the world where it's hard to access the sort of market data that is so essential to expansion. Okay, this is not a casual exercise. We're quite taken with Airtable, which is a tool that is sort of it's got the user interface of a spreadsheet and the functionality of a database. Maybe some of you have used it. The important thing isn't the tool itself. The important thing is that you're rigorously entering all of your data, because what's important is that you look across all the customer interviews you have, that particularly with people working remotely during COVID pandemic, everybody have ready remote access to everybody else's interview notes, essentially. So at this point, we are ready. Oh, not yet. In just a minute, we'll ask question number 4. So what's next? Let's imagine that we're 2 or 3 weeks in and we've identified some opportunities and we've identified some pain points. The next thing I recommend you do is, having identified a pain point, you don't jump into the business of venture creation immediately. We need to test and make sure that we've gotten it right. Okay? Many of the tools that we recommend you use to test your hypotheses about new business are almost laughably simple and low fidelity. All right? So, for example, working with a company that was working on construction. Construction is a domain that has had very, very low productivity gains, almost no productivity gains for the last 3 decades. Okay? We discovered any number of pain points. Many of them were terribly simple. For example, in interviewing many people on huge construction sites, we found that many of the subcontractors needed to be in the same place at the same time. It was ridiculous. People installing the fire systems, the sprinkler systems, needed to be crawling around in the same space at the same time as the people installing the plumbing. In the United States, it's 2 separate unions. It led to impossible failures in productivity. So what do you do when you have that sort of insight? You don't throw millions of dollars at it and launch some new business, okay? You don't roll things out in multiple cities. You don't build new prototypes. You spend 30 minutes creating a simple sketch of a simple software tool that would essentially mitigate the problem of inefficiencies between subcontractors, and see how people respond. Okay. Here's another example, and we do these obviously in every language. Here's another example of a tool that we used. In this case, it was for a manufacturer of automotive goods based in Mexico. Okay, in every case, the point I want to make here is we're using simple, low fidelity tools to poke people a little bit and get their honest response to a given challenge. And a point here that I want to make is do a lot of storyboards. Okay, don't do one, don't do two. We routinely do 20 or 30 storyboards over the course of an incubation to test lots of different ideas. These are physical storyboards. I hope soon that we'll all be working in the same office. These are virtual storyboards. We like a tool called Miro, M-I-R-O. There are many, many other tools. Here are storyboards for a financial services institution that we built and that we commented on with digital Post-it notes. We have not allowed COVID to slow us down in terms of creation of new ventures generally, or these types of tools specifically. By the time you get to something like storyboards or general stimulus-based research, if you're showing people 3 prototypes, 3 sketches, 3 renderings, 3 process diagrams, whatever it is, at this point, I recommend that you engage in what we like to call qual-quant research. Get people to use, get people to rate from 0 to 10 the ideas. Get some sort of numerical ranking. We like NPI, Net Promoter Index, but you can use whatever tool you like best to get the beginnings of quantification for the ideas. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to ask you a question. Where did Mach 49 figure this out? Ani, we're ready for question 4.
Yeah.
The notion of pain point interviews and asking people open-ended questions like, tell me a story about, or tell me about your biggest challenges today. Where does that come from? Are any of these terms familiar to you? And if so, where would you say that these ideas came from?
Yeah. So please choose the right answer. And I'm also reminding that you can actually ask questions to Dave. We will take them after the session.
Yep. Well, I'll be sure to wrap up with 10 minutes remaining.
Yeah. Okay, I think that I can. Oh, no, we have more votes. So, okay, sharing the results.
Yep. Pain point interviews are used a bit in both lean and agile, but fundamentally, pain point interviews came from design thinking. And so let's talk about this. I think that if you want to create new ventures, I see too many people just jumping on one method, okay? The winners in the innovation space use all of the current perspectives on innovation and new venture creation. Design thinking, as presented by organizations like the D School and IDEO, agile and lean, agile development and lean manufacturing, as presented by people like Steve Blank, Bob Dorff, and Eric Ries. Disruptive engineering, as presented by Clayton Christensen. Open innovation, as presented by Henry Chesborough. The winners in this space don't try to just like grab one method like design thinking that sounds cool and apply it everywhere. The winners say, okay, I've got a unique organization. I'm going to get conversant in all these perspectives on innovation, from agile to lean to design thinking, and I'm going to pick the specific methods that work best for me. That's what I recommend you do as well. That's certainly what we've done at Mach 49. We're 4 to 6 weeks into customer development. It's going to take you that long if you're asking yourself a significant question. Now it's time to move to visualizing the product. There are people that commission 6, 8, 12, 20 weeks of market research. I think it's a waste of time. I really do, and I would not do it if I were you. I think anything more than about 4 to 6 weeks of focused research into your market is not productive towards new venture creation. You are ready to visualize new products once you have a sense of segmentation, who is my customer and who is not my customer, the customer personas, and the early messaging. Fundamentally, what do I think my new product is? And when I say product, I'm using the term product or service interchangeably, since, for example, those of you in finance are primarily service providers, okay? Having identified pain points and areas of opportunity, the next questions you should ask yourself are, what should we build? Can we build it, or do we need external partners? And do we have the infrastructure to deliver it, okay? A prototype, for many of us, is the first working complex electromechanical system or software system. For the purposes of venture creation, redefine prototype in your mind. A prototype is any tool that helps potential customers understand what the future looks like, feels like, behaves like, okay? So for automotive OEMs who are customers of Metalsa, our client who works in automotive manufacturing, this tool, which helped hasten information flow with better use of manuals, I submit that this is a good example of a prototype. This particular prototype was interactive and software-based. Prototypes can also be renderings of hardware. And in fact, I know groups that currently are using virtual reality to allow people to virtually look at digital prototypes of new setups, for example, new ways of laying out oil fields or offices, or the avionics on airplanes. Along with visualizing what the solution is and figuring out a way to prototype it at low level, we must ask ourselves, what are the risks inherent in the product, okay? One risk that always looms large are technical risks. It's important, this is a chart that I put together. There was one system, a complex electromechanical system, where we knew that the biggest risks were sensor mounting and signal acquisition from these sensitive analog signals, okay? And for that reason, you don't test everything in parallel. You identify the biggest risk areas and mitigate those risk areas with analysis, prototyping, and iterative testing just as quickly as you can. More on that in just a minute. Keep in mind that as a large company, you have yet another advantage that a small startup does not. If you cannot build it, there are more options. You can buy a startup. Many of our customers do that, having identified an area of opportunity. They buy a startup and gain themselves 18 months, 2 years, 5 years, compared to what it would take them to build something organically. You can partner with external players. You can invest, but not acquire startups, medium-sized companies, in order for a shared agenda around disruptive advance and new venture creation. Okay? So having visualized what our product is based firmly on customer needs, and it's now time to ask ourselves the question that many people start with, but at this point you've earned the right to ask yourself, okay, where's the opportunity? Okay, and can we make money at it? So here's what, in my mind, and I'm just going to flash a lot of very quick examples on the screen, and then we're going to go to questions. Here's what I think you should be thinking about when you talk about a business and validating a business. Okay, first of all, you should have some way to illustrate the opportunity. Good ways to illustrate an opportunity are, here's a customer journey, and here are constrictions or breaks or problems in that customer journey. Another example is, here are relationships between key stakeholders, and here's an area where the flow of data is broken. Okay, here's an example for residential solar services for Australia, which were a very fractured market. Here's an example of an opportunity framework demonstrating the value of an integrated solution for solar in Western Australia. Okay. Any business plan starts with, first, the product vision, and I recommend 3 to 5 years as a good time horizon for the product vision. And second, the minimum viable product. That essential, irreducible minimum element of the ultimate product vision that will get you into the market as quickly as possible, okay? And again, I'm just gonna flash examples on the screen to give you a sense of the flavor of each of these, okay? One validates the minimum viable product with prototypes. So here's an example of medium fidelity prototypes that were used to validate some of the ideas around our solar solution in Australia, okay? It's always important to, at this point, use the business metrics we're all well familiar with: total addressable market, serviceable addressable market, total spend, and so on. At this point, having identified that there's customer pain and having identified that you have a solid idea for a product, you've now earned the right to look at both the cost side and the revenue side for the opportunity. It's important to summarize your plan in a product roadmap. And here again, we recommend you take a page from startups and structure everything into a series of sprints, okay? None of this monolithic funding of massive 2-year programs, okay? You can see in this case that the solar company we worked with broke their, this is high level, and obviously there was much, much more detail behind this, but they broke their program up into a roadmap and a series of sprints, and additional funding was predicated on successful sprints. The sprints varied from 3 to 6 months. Any program should be broken up into increments of no more than 3 to 6 months at this point. People often overlook go-to-market, and you should have a very firm answer when you build a business plan of exactly how you intend to reach your customers. That can be anything from, digital to physical, third party to internal. The important point I want to make is a thorough go-to-market plan talks about how you will bring your value proposition to market. It covers all the promotions, all the channels, all the mechanisms, all the partners. You're not going to get it right, but you need to have a thorough plan in place before you've earned the right to launch a new venture. Sometimes we see the people making a mistake of assuming a single stream of revenue, particularly at a time when, for example, data, the value of data exhaust can exceed the value of, say, equipment lease or equipment purchase revenue. We urge you to think about all the different streams of revenue, both from the MVP, there are typically just a few or one for the minimum viable product, and many for the ultimate product vision. And finally, we recommend that your operating plan essentially be a series of risk mitigation activities. Force yourself to think about risks and mitigation along the dimensions I mentioned. Will the customers like it? Technical. Can we build it? Business. Will anybody buy it, and can we make money at it? And mothership. Are we the right people to be doing this? Break those high-level headings down into smaller risk areas. People tend to be very good at naming risk areas, especially engineers. I'm one. Force yourself to come up with a mitigation plan for each of those risks. Arguably, a good development plan, a good operating plan, is a series of risk mitigation activities in early stage, all knit together into a cohesive plan. And so you can see here that we've rolled the, for one client, we've rolled all the various risk areas, okay, from issues about generating demand to making sure we have the right segmentation to specific questions about technology. We've rolled all those risk areas into a series of risk mitigation activities intended to answer certain questions. The funding is predicated on a successful answer to those questions. So let me ask the group one last question, and then I'll turn things around and ask you what questions you have for me. Annie, we're ready for our fifth and last question.
Yeah, we're ready.
So I'm urging you to break things into sprints. What playbook am I taking a page from? Is that agile development? Is that design thinking? Is that lean manufacturing? What do you think?
Yeah. Waiting for the answers, and we already have some interesting questions for you, Dave.
Great, great.
Yeah, please use the Q&A section to ask questions.
Good. And what have we got for our answer?
Yeah, so I think it's okay. I'm sharing the results.
Absolutely. Design thinking does use sprints, but the parent of sprints is agile development. So I urge you, again, in the spirit of grabbing whatever method works, just like we have, I urge everybody on this call to get familiar with all these different perspectives on new venture creation. Well, it's been a pleasure to give you an overview. What questions can I answer? Ani, I'll encourage you to just read a question out loud because there are many of them.
So the first question we have, do you involve tests with real customers during incubate phase?
Always.
Okay.
When we talk about real customers, they are real in two senses. They are current customers of the Global 1000. And second, they are people who we recruit as potential customers. So for example, right now today, I'm looking at a leasing model for capital equipment for one of my clients. And we are talking to customers of capital equipment. Think of aerospace, oil and gas, healthcare, and so on. Not only are we talking to their current customers, but we are also building our CRM, our customer relationship manager, by talking to potential customers. Next question.
The next question. So you said that the rate of innovation increased during the crisis and named iPad, Watson, and other products. Is it because such technologies, deep tech, hardware, have been invested in before the crisis? While being launched during the crisis, they have been in development some time ago.
Yes. So the fast answer is no one is quite sure. The acceleration of innovation and new venture creation during bad economic times is well documented. In fact, rigorously documented. No one is quite sure why this is true. And to the questioner's point, it is possible that multiple years of R&D, of open R&D, often come to fruition during these bad economic times. If you want to understand in general some hypotheses about these, I do recommend that you look at the work of Thomas Friedman, who's a New York Times author, who's done some very rigorous and quantitative work on this phenomenon of, he cites 2007 and 2008, which was a terrible recession in the United States, as a turning point for innovation and new venture creation in the United States. I'm happy to spend another 5 or 10 minutes for anyone who would like to stay. I apologize for not leaving quite enough time at the end.
Okay.
So I'm happy to continue to take questions.
Okay, great. We have some. So what are the metrics a corporate ventures should strive to reach? While classic startups target valuation for inside ventures, this might not be the best metric.
Sure. The single most important metric that any corporate venture should try to reach is increased revenues and improved retained earnings. At the end of the day, we're talking about creating a new business. And at least in my world, that is the fundamental metric of success: revenue and retained earnings. Okay? I do want to urge you, though, to consider unique metrics, that is, metrics that are unique to any given company. So for example, working with Renault, the French car company, on new venture creation, sure, they wanted to increase revenue, and like most organizations, new ventures were irrelevant to them if they did not could not see their way clear to moving to $500 million within a modest amount of time, 5 to 10 years. Less than $500 million for a large Global 1000 makes it kind of an irrelevant business that should be spun off. What I want to say, though, is in addition to revenues and retained earnings, Renault, for example, was very concerned in terms of a metric to improve their working relationship with Samsung Electronics in Korea. That was as important as revenues and retained earnings. So the reason I bring that up is you often have some surprising metrics of success, okay? Particularly with large companies, having to do with improving your brand, strengthening your relationship with customers, getting to know a particular technology, enhancing your relationship with a corporate partner. Be sure to be alert to those.
Great.
Next question.
Yeah, the next question actually is also related with the topic. So could you provide any statistics on the amount of projects passing from one stage to another? It means from incubate to accelerate and to scale. So do you have any insights on
Can I take this question?
Absolutely. Maxim, I'd love you to share the numbers. We are very, very proud of them.
Yeah, actually, a lot of people talk about startups, having 90% failure rate. So 1 out of 10 actually gets to market and to first revenue and actually succeeds. In our world, in all of our projects, we have done the statistics, 92% are successful, get to revenue, 92%. This is actually turning the statistics the other way around. And the secret is very simple. We test out all the ideas very early, just exactly like Dave has said. So it's not that we are smarter than other people. We have a method which allows to get rid of the wrong ideas when we talk to the customers, essentially, and we test with the customers. Dave?
That's exactly right. And Maxim and I have been involved, Maxim and I, for example, were involved in a program that sure seemed like a great idea. It had to do with a new business built around real estate in the Japanese market. It turned out 4 weeks in not to pass pain point tests with customers. We stopped it. It's just where you want to be. That's what gives us that very high success rate that Maxim quoted.
There was also another great example I unfortunately was not involved with, but I'm very proud of, for a major German utility which went to the US market. And their idea clearly didn't work. We actually wanted to stop the project because we guarantee our fees, and if we don't get to success, we actually give money back. Are okay to give money back to our customers. But we stop projects early if we see there is no potential. We advised the client to stop the project because the idea was not working. We pivoted. They insisted to pivot. We developed something completely different, but which fitted the market. And 2 years down the road, the company, the startup, this German utility incubated in the US, was sold at a market capitalization of 150 million.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we no need to be secretive. If anybody is curious, the company is Pair.ai, and they were sold to Constellation. Yeah, and one that I really enjoyed working with. Annie, what else would people like to know from me?
Yeah, so the next question, is 12 weeks really enough to plan through a deep tech solution that has a number of R&D challenges embedded in its technology?
The fast answer is a 12-week solution is built around Horizon 1 or Horizon 2 technology. There are a lot of business frameworks out there. A lot of them are garbage. But a really good business framework is the notion of Horizon 1, 2, and 3. And let me introduce those and then get back to the questioner's specific question. Horizon 1 technologies are those that are used today and in many cases involve incremental improvements to the current technical landscape. Horizon 2 technologies are existing technologies which are always stubbornly 3 to 5 years out for organizations, implementing artificial intelligence, implementing Internet of Things, okay, implementing cloud and so on. That's Horizon 2. And Horizon 3 are much further out, nanotechnology, elements of synthetic biology, and so on. You're not going to touch a Horizon 3 technology in 12 weeks, okay?
Sure.
A Horizon 1 technology is too easy to cover in 12 weeks. That's just like an incremental software upgrade. You don't need a new venture creation for that. Where this really shines is on implementation of commercialized but leading edge technologies, say Internet of Things, in a Horizon 2 program. So I hope that answers your question.
And if I may add, I actually find this a very, very Russian question, I have to say. In our work, what we experience is that in Russia, there is this tradition of great, deep technical expertise.
Yes.
And innovation is very deeply linked with developing new technology.
Yes.
Where Russian companies very often under-deliver is actually taking the technology, which is Horizon 2 or sometimes Horizon 1, understanding the customer pain, developing a product, not a technology, but using the tech to package a product, price it, distribute it, and sell it. That's where Russian people, unfortunately, have a lot to learn from the Americans, who are the best at selling things. In this approach is very much about using Horizon 2, but really understanding the customer pain, developing a product, delivering the product, pricing it right, and having market success.
Yep. Thank you, Maxim. And as an aside, on the note on the chat page on this Zoom is Mach 49's Disruptive Minds blog, and one of my blog entries is on the use of Horizon 1, 2, and 3 appropriately in new venture creation. Other questions, any?
Yeah, can we take some more questions?
Of course,
okay?
of course. I'm here for you.
Great.
I'm here for you.
So you talk about Global 1000 following this path. What about smaller companies? So can they still have success, or it's in a different scale? What about them?
Yes to both questions. Smaller companies, which we've worked with startups, we've worked with small companies. I just finished a project, for example, with a small silicon chip, fabless silicon chip manufacturer. They can certainly have success. The difference is it's not a portfolio play. Certainly for a startup, we're working with a couple of startups right now, and to a great extent with a small and medium-sized business. You know, a business with revenues less than 500 million, for example, it's difficult to support portfolios of new programs marching from ideate into incubate, into accelerate, into scale. Medium-sized companies absolutely can and should support 1 or 2 or 3 new incubations, however.
Okay, thank you. So another question is related with the uncertainty we face today. So the question is, do you think it would be great if the startup need to set up some pivoting strategy if the market is changing rapidly?
Yeah, ask the question one more time. Set up a what strategy?
Startup should, I suppose that the participant is asking if the startup should set up some pivoting strategies.
Yes.
If the markets are changing very rapidly, so how to react?
Let's first remind everyone, pivot, the English word pivot, which originally had a mechanical meaning, is defined by Steve Blank as a change absent the downside. Normally change is such an evil word in corporations. Oh God, they changed their minds again. Now we've got to do this. Okay. Steve Blank coined the term pivot for a change in business strategy, where a change in the direction of a new venture, absent the negativity and the downside. So pivots should be built into the early stage of new venture creation. For the first 12 months, for the 3 months of incubation, and the next 9 months of accelerate, the first piece of accelerate is called build to learn. Businesses should absolutely be prepared to pivot and to adjust their direction. Businesses should have the humility to know, they should have the humility to realize they're not able to intuit all the answers. They're not able to get everything correct. You're not going to get your segmentation and your technical risk areas and your go-to-market strategy, and your branding message correct. So I will just say again, structuring things in a series of sprints with a clear definition of what success looks like is the single best thing you can do to prepare yourself for pivots over the first year. After 1 to 2 years for most of our incubation, the idea is sufficiently solid so that it can move into scale, at which point the pivots are much smaller.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And we have 2 more questions.
Sure.
So Artyom is asking, if I build an incubator, do I predefine the areas where I'd like to find a new business model? Or I state an open question and rely on 4-axis framework to select what to test? What could
An
you
excellent
tell us?
question. And Maxim may want to weigh in on this as well. I urge you to
Maxim,
constrain.
sorry.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
I urge you to constrain your outreach, okay? I urge you not, expressed in the negative, I urge you not to reach out to the population of your organization and say, hey, what should we do next, okay? You can constrain it along a number of dimensions. You can talk about end applications, specific technologies, specific business models, specific segmentation, but in some way, you need to give people a target to shoot at. And one other little note here is, if the specific challenge, which is well expressed as a challenge question to your group, if the specific challenge is not of interest or of relevance to some fraction of the people in the company, that's okay. Because you need to assure them that every 6 months or so, you'll run another new venture competition. A new venture competition should never be an isolated one-off event. It should be something that recurs so that it's inclusive over the course of years. And over the course of years, covers enough different topics so that everybody is included. I'd love a Russian perspective on this, Maxim. What have you seen in successful and large organizations at the ideate phase?
So all the things you said, but I find Russian corporations way more top-down driven. Mm-hmm. And with a lot of kind of challenge coming from most senior leadership.
Yes.
When we run new venture competitions, like with you would do this in America, people tend to come up by kind of Russian standards with what some people call small ideas. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you go to large corporations in Russia, I don't know, big green bank or something like that, there will be big feel that people should be coming with great ideas, things mm-hmm. like which are capable of changing the world. Otherwise, that's not interesting.
Yes.
And the big challenge is how to make sure that to merge the two perspectives.
Yep. Look, 2 things. I'd rather see people come up with big ideas, which can later be bounded, than small ideas, which are always going to be small. And the other thing is, look, if in a tops-down business, and that's not just Russian corporations, Maxim, as you know, that's corporations everywhere. Tops-down innovation, and I say this with 30 years of experience, doesn't fly. The general notion that we're going to look at other players who are successful in innovation that are in your industry and identify at top level hiring practices and organizational structures and push those down from the top. It sounds logical, it sounds like a good way to go, but the fact is, chaotic creation of new ventures from the bottom up under the encouragement of the C-level executives is the only successful recipe we've seen for new venture creation.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Dave. I think the challenge is to take guidance from the top and define the challenge, and then moderate the top execs to keep it that way. Because otherwise, they think they know better than everyone, but they're never responsible, and people end up being responsible for not implementing their fantastic ideas. But then kind of take the guidance, define the challenge which you need to solve, but then unleash the power of the people against that particular challenge, which eventually should be helpful for the company.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Okay,
good. Take one last question.
The last question. Okay, we have some more, but I suggest that we take them after the webinar, and you can be back to the participants with the answers.
Certainly.
Okay. The question is, can corporate employees have equity in ventures they helped to create? Or should they be on a regular payroll and bonus model? What do you think?
Yes, either will work. Now, I can answer for the United States. The majority of people working in corporate startups do not have equity, all right? Some fraction of the businesses that we work with spin out and take a minority equity ownership in the new venture that they create. The example that Maxim brought up a little earlier, Pair.ai, is a true spin-off of its parent company, RWE, the German energy giant, okay? More typically, we have an approach which we call phantom stock as opposed to actual equity. Now, phantom stock is not stock at all. It's just called stock because the word sounds good. Phantom stock or phantom equity is a bonus plan, but it is a bonus plan that is more similar to what the sort of upside that members of a startup would see, okay? What we find is that the highest potential individuals in a big organization, and let's face it, in a big organization, in many big organizations, they're going to quit if they're not given these exciting, ambitious ideas to create, build, and launch new ventures. We've found them in general to be quite satisfied with a bonus plan that, as with the upside of a startup, reflects specifically the performance of the startup, and where the payout is a very strong function of the performance of that new venture.
Great, Dave. And
If I may add, it's actually a very important point which was brought up. I think there's a difference depending on the stage of the venture. So during ideation and incubation stage, what actually doesn't work? What doesn't work is that you do a venture, have upside of a venture, but still keep your salary and your daily job. That doesn't work. So what we say is that ideation stage, you can keep your corporate job and combine with developing new ideas, pitching your ideas to the top management. There is no equity upside in that. Your upside is that you get stuffed, so you're allowed to spend 100% of your time for 3 months on incubating your ideas, and you get a chance to get it funded. During this time, the employee should keep his job and should keep his or her salary. So during this time, it's the task of the corporation to provide so-called job security, but still give an opportunity to work on the incubation. Once the incubation is approved, so once the corporation decides, you, Mr. or Mrs. Employee, you can go and be now an entrepreneur and launch this new venture. At this point in time, people should give up their line job. They get a different salary. They get upside, like Dave had just pointed out, but their job, day-to-day job, is gone. There's no way to go back. They are committed. They have skin in the game. They must make it work. You should spend your days and nights trying to make this work.
Yep.
And then you get your
upside. Maxim. Yep.
In a lot of Russian corporations I've seen, but probably that's a natural human phenomenon. Corporate entrepreneurs, they think, it's so great. I have job security. I have my line job, stable income, and upside from an entrepreneur. That doesn't work. It's either one or the other.
Okay.
Thank you, Maxim. Now, Annie, let me just say, at this point, I will turn the conversation back to Annie to close us out. But Annie would also like to emphasize that through you, Maxim and I are very, very happy to continue the dialogue with, in particular, with people who ask questions and want to talk more, or who did not get a chance to have their question answered. It's important to us to maintain these dialogues with the Russian community of people interested in new venture creation. So please let people know through GenerationS how people can reach Maxim and me.
Yeah, sure. So we're going to send follow-up emails to our participants. And my question was, so we're going to share your contacts if it's okay for you, so the participants can reach out with any questions they have. Does it work?
Maxim, I think Maxim should be our first point of contact.
Great.
Because he's on the ground, and Maxim and I promise to work together and answer all questions that come in.
Okay, perfect. So,
So you can follow up with questions. You can also, some people tend to benefit from having these ideas spread within their companies. So what we also consider doing is, if some of you decide to bring Dave or myself or some of our other colleagues in front of your management to have a similar discussion on how corporate innovation can be further implemented in the organizations where you work. And we would be very happy to consider kind of dedicated sessions to a specific corporation, provided that you have interested audience.
in this case, I would ask probably the last question because it's very related of what Maxim mentioned now. So the question is actually, what is the time horizon you should expect your incubation program to pay back or to show some return on investments? Do you have any ideas or?
Yeah, you need to be realistic about this. I can answer for US businesses, and I'm sure Maxim has thoughts as well. Look, it is typical for our new ventures to start to see revenue, not profits, but revenue within 18 months. I could point to, offline, if people are curious, I could point to 5 different businesses on fields varying from renewable energy to construction to electric vehicles that are all seeing revenue. For profitability, 3 to 5 years is typical. And we need to be humble here. Even fast-growing startups often take 3 years, for example, to reach 50,000, 100,000, I'm sorry, 50 million or 100 million US dollars in annual revenues. Okay, faster-growing businesses after 5 years can see something like $500 million if the business has grown very, very aggressively. Maxim, how would you answer that same question?
Yes, I think it's very important to define your success metrics upfront. What we have faced with the Russian corporations, be it because of the COVID or because of generally economic environment, people are extremely short-term focused, and there is a lot of focus on the short-term profitability. In these situations, a lot of ventures, unfortunately, will not survive in terms of process, let me put it this way, and will be killed just because they will not meet the profitability cash flow requirement of the company who is struggling to survive. Let me put it this way. So it's very important to be very clear about your metrics and having right targets. The success in terms of revenue should be very tangible and very short term. So 12 to 18 months, first revenue, that should be the target. Profitability is harder to reach, 3-5 years, just like Dave said. If people want to do innovation and want to do have quick impact on the P&L, or at least no negative impact on the P&L, they should consider corporate venturing, corporate venture capital. So rather make investments, and if you make a portfolio of small investments, and that has potential to grow in value relatively quickly. And this is a balance sheet item, not a P&L item, doesn't hit your profitability too fast. So better allocate some money to a corporate venture fund, and we help you make some good investments in Russia and outside. However, usually those things do not solve fundamental innovation issues within the company. But for those, it's very important to have the buy-in of the top management and have realistic ROE expectations.
Okay, so thank you so much, actually. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Maxim. Thank you for this very insightful and fruitful session. We will share your presentation. We had the questions, so we are happy to share your presentation and the contacts so our participants can reach out to you. And yeah, thanks, and hope for the further cooperation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
It was a pleasure. Bye, everybody.
Bye.